Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for your patience as we just got ourselves set up. I'm Lorraine Scottson, CEO of the Saola Foundation for Annamite Mountains Conservation. Very pleased to have you all here today. I missed the last couple of our online seminars because I was on maternity leave, so I'm really pleased to be back in time for this really exciting session that we have for you today. So a quick reminder or an introduction for those who don't already know us, the Saola Foundation for Annamite Mountains Conservation, our mission is to prevent unrecoverable loss of biodiversity in the Annamite Mountains bioregion. So that's the Annamite Mountains are the chain of mountains that form much of the border between Laos, Vietnam, and a little bit of Cambodia. So this is one of the Earth's true biodiversity hotspots, home to an unbelievable concentration of endemic species. That's species that you'll find nowhere else on Earth. The flagships program of the Saola Foundation is the search for the critically endangered Saola. That's one of the rarest species on the planet. So if you're new to our audience, again, welcome. Lulu is going to post some links to our social media channels, newsletter sign up, in the chat. So please, if you haven't already, please join us on this incredible adventure that we are on. The Saola Foundation, we now employ close to 40 Lao team members, conservation scientists, the majority of whom form our incredible field team. That's our Annamite Mountains Research and Conservation team. And that team spends much of their time deep in the forest, working in biodiversity research and conservation. So our team includes many members from rural villages in the Annamite Mountains, and they took their first steps into careers in conservation science through our recruitment efforts. You're going to get to meet some of them today. We have 7 Indigenous groups of the Annamite Mountains represented in our team. And we are working hard to increase the role of women in conservation science as well, with women now holding key leadership positions within our team. Today, you're going to specifically learn about 2 very specialist units within our research and conservation team. That's our animal tracking unit, which has been trained by our international CyberTracker track and trail experts, and our scent detection dog unit, trained by Working Dogs for Conservation. So together, they represent a regionally leading example of the strength and versatility of these specialist approaches for monitoring and protecting rare species. Our flagship program, the search for Saola, is well underway. So you're going to hear a lot about this in today's session. In addition to the Saola Search Programme, the Saola Foundation, we have a broader identity emerging. We're developing several long-term in situ conservation programs centred on other flagship and species, such as a newly discovered species of leaf monkey that our team collected evidence of over the last year, and the critically endangered large antler muntjac. But the countless other threatened species, dukes, gibbons, pangolins, turtles, and many, many more that share the remarkable landscapes that we work in. So with that, before we begin, well, just a few housekeeping notes. For the presentation, I would recommend selecting speaker view for your best viewing experience. I would suggest just to save the bandwidth, if it matters, turn your camera off during the presentations. We'll invite you to turn them back on again during a Q&A at the end. If you have any questions as they come into your head, just pop them into the chat at any time, and we will put up as many as possible to our speakers at the end. And so I think that covers it. With that, it will be my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. We've got a really incredible combination today of two of the sort of Lao national experts on our topics at hand, and international expertise from the United States. So from the United States, we've got Renae Counter from the Canine Field, a Canine Field Specialist at Working Dogs for Conservation, one of our technical partners, and Jonathan Shapiro, a professional tracker with the CyberTracker Conservation Network and Wildlife Tracking Institute. Our Lao experts with us today, Vatsana Chanthavong and Duangkhamxay. So Vatsana and To are the co-team leaders of the Saola Foundation scent detection dog unit. With that, I shall hand over to Jonathan, who's going to get us started today. Thank you so much, everyone.
All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for showing up. So I want to talk about the history of CyberTracker conservation, which is the international organization, wildlife tracking organization I'm affiliated with. I want to talk about my training with them. I want to talk about how we track for conservation, some of the methods that we use. And I want to talk directly about how this applies to looking for Saola, which is a really, really, really rare species. So let's actually just jump right to the next slide, Lulu. So CyberTracker conservation, we're going to start this story on a different continent than Laos. We're going to start talking about this story in Southern Africa. In the 90s, some San Bushmen trackers who still had an unbroken lineage of wildlife tracking and hunting skills stretching back probably 30 or 40,000 years, started to work with a group of Western scientists to come up with ways to gather data in the field by using wildlife tracking so that the data could be used for conservation efforts. And this served a couple of different purposes. It gave these indigenous San Bushmen trackers a way to continue using those skills as they were losing access to their traditional hunting grounds and were no longer able to hunt as much. It also gave them a way to integrate into the monetary economy, and it provided really important data for field biologists and game managers at hunting lodges and safari grounds that they were not able to gain otherwise because these people had a very unique skill set. And out of that collaboration came an organization called CyberTracker. And the name CyberTracker is a little confusing now because cyber has come to have so many connotations about being online. But this photo in the upper right hand shows these indigenous Bushmen trackers using a Palm Pilot device to gather data because they could neither read nor write, but the information that they were able to glean from the field was really important. So they developed an icon-based program on a Palm Pilot that allowed them to go out and press the button for lion and press the button for male lion and press the button for dominant male lion and press the button for hunting. And so then all of those icon catches were GPS located. And when they came back to the research scientists, they had a whole picture of what all the species on the landscape were doing that they wouldn't have been able to gain otherwise. So the cyber in the name is about the Palm Pilot program, and the tracker is about the traditional skills. And so CyberTracker works to preserve traditional tracking cultures, primarily in Southern Africa, but around the world. It develops and makes available this software for data gathering. And the third thing that it does, which is relevant to what we're talking about today, is it certifies people in wildlife tracking. So when the field biologists were trying to discern the quality of the data that was being gathered, they realized that some trackers were better than others. And so they worked together to come up with a way to assess skills in the field. And those certifications are a big part of what CyberTracker does. So when Lorraine introduced me as a professional and specialist tracker, the words professional and specialist relate to the certifications that I have earned through CyberTracker International. And tracking certifications are a big way that CyberTracker has made a name for itself in North America. You can see this photo in the bottom right of a tracking certification taking place. And the guy in the sunglasses is the evaluator. He's explaining the tracks to the people who have been answering questions about them. Next slide. So that's a little bit about where I come to this skill set from. And when we talk about tracking, we're talking about two component skill sets. One is track and sign, which is identification and interpretation of any evidence of an animal that we find on the landscape. It could be a track, it could be scat. In this presentation, I'm going to say scat. A lot of you are used to hearing the word dung. They mean the same thing. So a sign that an animal leaves on the ground could be scat, could be a track, it could be feeding sign, it could be a place where they've bedded down. And identifying and interpreting the species that made that sign and what it means for the animal's life is track and sign. Identify and interpret. And then trailing is following and finding. You find a track, you assess whether it's fresh enough that you might be able to catch up with the animal, and then you follow the trail and see if you can actually catch up to the animal without it seeing you. So those are the two component skill sets that make up what we call tracking broadly in the CyberTracker world. Next slide. So here's a couple examples of track and sign. I had the extreme great fortune to spend some time in the Kalahari Desert in Namibia this spring with some of the San Bushmen trackers who helped originate the CyberTracker system. This is a group of us on the left discussing elephant feeding sign. You can see down here where my cursor is, that is an elephant track. The elephant had been rooting around in here for some roots. And, oh right, you can't see my cursor, but you can see Lulu's cursor. Yeah, so the big oval in the foreground of that photo is an elephant track, yep. And so when we found this, we wanted to know how fresh is it and what was the animal doing, because elephants can be remarkably quiet and hard to notice on the landscape in those thorny scrublands. And if you surprise them, they can get pretty aggressive. So when we found that, we were like, oh, we need to know what's happening here. We don't need to find this animal. In fact, we don't want to find this animal, but we need to know if we can stay here or if we should leave. And the photo on the right is a photo of Bunchan, who is a member of the Lao tracking team in the Annamite Mountains. And he is pointing to a smear of mud on the trunk of a tree. And that is scent and territory marking from a male wild pig, a wild boar. And this is useful in that context because there is potentially a swine flu epidemic in the mountains in Laos right now, and wild pig numbers are way down. So when we see these signs, we can ask ourselves, oh, is this fresh? What was this pig doing? Is this before or after the swine flu came through? And we can make some hypotheses about wild pig populations in the area based on the sign that we're seeing. Next slide. Okay, trailing. Sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not. The photo on the left is a white-tailed deer walking through the woods in the winter right near my house in northern Vermont in the United States. And on the right-hand side, we have a group of San Bushmen trackers that are following an antelope track. And they're in a wide open grassland, and every once in a while there's a patch of dirt where you find a track. Other than that, you are relying on extremely subtle signs where the animal has moved grass aside, or maybe has dried out the dew if you're in early enough in the morning for that to happen as it's passed by. And you're also relying on your knowledge of how that particular species of antelope uses the landscape and making predictions about where to look next for the track. So that's trailing. We just talked about track and sign. Those are the two component skill sets of tracking that we talk about with CyberTracker. Next slide. So I worked with the Saola Foundation team in Khao Yai National Park in Thailand to do some track and sign and some trailing trainings. Here's a couple photos from that. So one of the ways that we can interpret what animals are doing from their tracks is by looking at the pattern of tracks, because the pattern of tracks gives us some insight into how the quadruped was moving, right? Different gaits or different biomechanics that animals use produce different patterns, and they use different gaits for different behaviors. So in order to understand that, we pretended to be animals, and we got on our hands and we got on all fours, and we walked around and tried to recreate the patterns in the tracks that we saw on the ground. This is a really amazing way to learn this stuff when you get it into your body. And so this is us doing a clinic on animal biomechanics by imitating the tracks that we were seeing in the ground. And there aren't a lot of tracking resources available in that part of the world. In North America and Europe, there are field guides. There are a lot of biologists you can call and ask about their experience. We didn't have that luxury in Thailand, so we were kind of creating the resources as we go. And so on the left of that photo, you can see some tracks in the ground, and we found those, and we thought they were probably made by a species of civet, a mid-sized species of civet. but we didn't really have any references to check to see the differences in the tracks between the species of civet that are found there. But one of the team members had recently been in a wildlife market and happened to see the feet of a civet for sale at a booth. And he took a photo with the little Saola Foundation ruler there next to them for scale, and we got them out, and the arrangement of toes and the arrangement of pads and the size all matched pretty perfectly. So we were fairly confident that we got a good ID on which species of civet that was based on that. Next slide. A few more pictures from Khao Yai. On the left, that is Rob Timmons, who is field director with the Saola Foundation, and some other members of the field team, looking at this beautiful sunset. And Rob is intently drawing pictures of tracks that we saw on the ground, right? Trying to create some of those references, trying to learn more about the track and sign of the species found there. And so there are a lot of things that I didn't know going into it, right? On the lower right-hand side, that's the track of another smaller civet species. We happened to see that animal make that track. So we got some photos of it for reference. I would not have known that had I not seen the animal make the track. But there are a lot of universal patterns in tracking worldwide. So the two photos on the upper right, the left-hand photo is a photo of bird tracks. Those are crow tracks. Crow tracks are crow tracks the world around. So we saw those and I said, hey, Rob, what species of crows do you have here? And he said, oh, we have, I think they're called thick-billed crows. I was like, okay, well, that's 99% what this is, because the way that those two inner toes hug towards each other and the proportion of the negative space between the rest of the toes is a dead ringer for crows everywhere else in the world that I've seen. And the photo on the right is a canid track. It's a slender, elongated, small to medium-sized canid track. So I saw that on the ground and went to the field guides, figured out what canid species they have there. That is a golden jackal. So by knowing the morphology of the tracks, the stuff that is consistent the whole world around, and then having a species list for the area, you can get really far with tracking, even if you've never been to a place. Next slide. So I want to talk about scat collection, because we're going to talk about that a bunch right now when we talk about the methods that the Saola Foundation field team is using to look for Saola. So Saola are an ungulate, right? A deer or antelope type species. And typically the dung of all of those types of animals looks like that scat on the left-hand picture. That is muntjac scat, which is a smaller deer species, smaller than the Saola, but their scat can be confused for Saola. So the primary method that the field team is using now to detect presence of Saola on the landscape in the Annamite Mountains is collecting scat in the field and DNA testing it. In the middle, you can see a map, GPS points where scat was found on the landscape. And on the right-hand side, that's a photo of several members of the field team actually collecting the scat with a little plastic spoon and putting it in a vial to bring it back to camp for testing. Next slide. So the three basic methods that are used to find scat in the Annamite Mountains: tracking, contour surveys, and scent detection dogs. The upper right-hand photo of all the squiggly lines on the map, so those black lines are actually GPS tracks recorded by the team as they walked contour intervals along the mountains and the ridges in the Annamites. So that area has been very thoroughly searched, right? And so when we think about how the team is orienting itself to the landscape, I really like to think about that image because it gives me a picture of what they do in the field and how much terrain they cover. So on the one hand, we have tracking, right? Going out and looking for track and sign of animals, maybe finding some fresh tracks and following them. Then we have contour surveys where you're just walking a predetermined path looking for scat. And then you have the scent detection dogs, which use their noses to find scat. Next slide. Scent detection dogs, strengths and weaknesses. They find a lot of scat. This is a serious strength. Their noses are amazing. Some of the weaknesses, or I would say like places to troubleshoot for the scent detection dogs, is that the Annamites can be a tough place for them health-wise. And I know that Renae and To and Vatsana are going to talk more about this. And they only find the scat. They don't follow the trails of the animals, right? Following the trails of the animals can give you some real good insight into how they use the terrain and the overall natural history and ecology of that species that simply finding a scat on the landscape can't give you. Next slide. Contour searches, strengths and weaknesses. So you saw that photo a couple slides ago of how completely the teams search the landscape when they're doing contour searches. Big strength, the team is already trained to do this. This is a method that is well within the wheelhouse of the Saola Foundation field team. It does not take that long to reach proficiency, and it's highly successful. In 2025, the team found 261 scat samples. Almost all of them were from contour searches. Some of the weaknesses of this method are that if you're walking a line on contour, if you've got your GPS unit out and you're looking at it to tell you where to go along contour, you may miss scat that is 30 feet below you or 30 feet above you, right? And when you're looking for an animal like the Saola, where we're looking at probably 50 to 100 individuals left in the wild, every single individual scat that you find matters. And so the fact that contour intervals are sort of predetermined and you don't necessarily stray from them a lot can mean that you don't find all the scat in a given area. It doesn't produce ecological literacy in the same way that tracking does. You're not following trails, you're not looking at the track and sign of the animal, discussing it, making hypotheses about what they're doing, consulting the literature and talking to experts and learning about the animal that way. You're walking across the landscape looking for scat. And when you have several species of ungulate whose track and sign may look the same in a given area, like we have Saola that we're looking for, and then we also have muntjac and wild boar tracks may often look like Saola tracks. So one way to make some hypotheses about whether you may have an individual Saola in an area is if you know how those animals use the landscape and you start following some trails and you say, hey, this animal is moving like a Saola moves on the landscape. Let's just remember that in this place. You don't build that kind of ecological literacy with contour searches. Next slide. Tracking. So strengths. Proficiency leads directly to scat. When you get good at following trails in the mountains, you find a fresh trail that is fresh enough to follow, you follow it, and ungulates leave a lot of scat. They feed a lot, right? They are high volume feeders, fibrous material, they're just passing through their digestive tract to get all the nutrition out of it, and they're dropping a fair amount of scat as they go. So if you can follow the trail proficiently of an ungulate, you will find scat. Trackers learn about animals directly by observing what they are doing, not in real time. They're sort of time traveling when you're looking at the track and sign and you're following the trails, but you learn directly about what an animal is doing on the landscape by observing its behavior. It may be more effective than contour searches. We don't know this yet because the team is still learning these skills. The weaknesses are that proficiency takes time. This is not something you can take a weekend class in and go out and do. I spent a lot of time working with the team in Thailand. They are working hard on those skills in the field themselves. I'm going to work more with them. It's going to take years to build up that repertoire, that skill set, that experience to be able to be really good at this. But it's important that they do it because it dovetails so nicely with the other two search methods. And it's also weather and season dependent. It is a lot easier to follow trails in the wet season in the mountains than it is in the dry season. The wet season, the leaves stay moist, they hold tracks better, and when it rains hard, it sort of resets the ground and all the old tracks get a little bit erased and it's much easier to tell what's fresh and what's old. When you get into the dry season, all the tracks from the past 6 weeks or 3 months are still on the ground, and it is extremely, extremely difficult to sort through them and figure out which trail you're actually following. So there are times of year where trailing, following the tracks of the animal to try to find it or to find scat, are much less effective than other times of year. Next slide. So why do these three approaches matter for finding Saola? And in order to talk about that, we need to talk a little bit about the methods that field biologists usually use for finding animals. Because when field biologists are looking for animals, they are almost always looking for populations and not individuals. And the fact that Saola numbers are so low basically mean that we're looking for individuals. So one method that is often used is mark and recapture, right? This fish on the left, somebody netted a whole bunch of fish out in the ocean. They put tags on some of them, they let them go, and then when they netted fish again in that area, they counted how many had tags, and they used the proportion of tagged to non-tagged fish to make some estimates about the overall population. Or environmental DNA on the right. This field tech is getting water samples to test for DNA of a certain species. When you have a lot of individuals of a certain species on a landscape, inevitably some of their DNA is going to end up in the waterways. But that only works if the populations are high. Other methods are transects or point counts, where you walk a straight line through an area and you count how much evidence of a species you find. And then you extrapolate from that one line across the landscape to the numbers for the whole landscape. But that only works if there are enough animals that you're sure to find evidence of at least one when you walk across the landscape, which is not true for Saola. Camera trapping is the same. If we're thinking about an area roughly the size of New Jersey in the Annamite Mountains, in which the Saola Foundation field team is looking for Saola, the odds of them catching one on a game cam are pretty low, unless they had way, way more game cams out on the landscape than is logistically feasible. And aerial surveys is another big one. Not going to work in the Annamite Mountains for a lot of reasons. So the Saola Foundation is searching big areas for small numbers of animals, not small areas for big numbers of animals. So they really have to come up with their own suite of methods that's going to work for their particular application. Next slide. So I will leave you by saying that combining these three methods is kind of novel and innovative. This is a search that is unlike other searches on the landscape. And so it's really cool to see how the team has adapted their search methods for the realities of the difficulty on the ground. I'll just leave you with a couple photos here. On the left, this is when we were in Khao Yai. This is the team making plaster casts of tracks. Right, you find a track that's well set into some firm ground and you mix up some plaster of Paris and pour it in there, let it dry, and you pick it up and you have this really cool reverse impression of a track that you can then study to learn the foot morphology of that animal and be able to identify it more easily in the field next time. And on the right are Bertie and Norman, and they are the two scent detection dogs that the field team has going on. And I will turn it over to To, Vatsana, and Renae to talk a little bit more about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. I have heard Jonathan's talk a few times now, and I always learn something new. So thanks for that. So I am Renae Counter, and I am a canine field specialist with Working Dogs for Conservation, also known as WD4C. So Working Dogs for Conservation, we've been around for over 25 years now. And we were the first detection dog organization in North America focused on conservation targets. So the four founders kind of pioneered this discipline in North America and made it what it is today. I have been with the organization for almost 7 years now. And I have been helping with the Saola detection dog unit since its inception. And it has been really incredible to work with this team. Our four dog handlers, as well as our dog team leader, Vatsana, are just incredible. They are incredibly dedicated to these dogs. They're always really excited to learn more. And so just really quickly, this is a photo of the entire detection dog team. So how it works is each dog has two handlers that work with them. So they switch off and on of who's working with them. So on the left there, those are Norman's handlers. That is Long Suta and my cam. And then you have Vatsana in the middle. And then you have Buntavi and To who handle Bertie. Next slide, please. So what are conservation dogs? Conservation dogs are just dogs that have been trained to sniff out targets of conservation value. So that can be dung on the landscape, that can be live animals, that can be dead animals. If you're thinking about things like wind farms, mortality rates, it can be invasive things, so invasive weeds or other invasive species like zebra and quagga mussels. We have recently been using them for disease detection in animals, and they are also used for anti-poaching work. So they have a broad view of what a conservation dog is. And what makes these guys special, especially when you're thinking about them searching across landscapes, is they're a very non-invasive method. So when you're thinking about these dogs looking for a species in a landscape, searching for their dung, the dogs never actually have to come in contact with that species. So they're not going out there and harassing them at all. And they are also able to search for multiple targets at once. Which is really important, especially for Norman and Bertie, as you'll see a little later on. It's not just one thing that these dogs are out there looking for. You can utilize them in multiple ways. One of our founding dogs at Working Dogs for Conservation was a dog named Wicket, and in her lifetime, she was on over 32 targets. When it comes to finding scat in the environment, as Jonathan mentioned, their dogs are more effective than humans alone, and they're also unbiased. So if you train a dog, say, to find bear scat, and it's not like humans who maybe are like, I don't want bears in this landscape. The dog doesn't care about bears in the landscape, it cares about finding this target. Next slide, please. So who are the dogs? The dogs are really high energy, toy obsessed dogs. And that toy obsession I'll get into a little bit more on the next slide. But that is like the key component that we look for when we're searching and selecting our dogs for this work. And they have to have a natural drive to search. So the kind of dog where if you take their toy and you throw it into some tall grass or some bushes, they're going to naturally use their nose and go in there and recover that toy, rather than a dog who is going to look back at their handler and say, that looks really hard, can you just go get it for me? And we also need dogs who are very fit and agile, especially when you're thinking about the terrain in the Annamite Mountains. It can be really difficult terrain that can change momentarily, especially when those rains start coming down. There's lots of steep terrain and rocks and river crossings. So we needed dogs who were up for the task. And we also needed dogs who wanted to engage closely with handlers. So for this project in particular, we sought out spaniels for multiple reasons. One of them being that they're very small. So these little guys are pretty easy to transport. The handlers are able to just pick them up and forge them across a river when needed. They fit perfectly in between their handlers on the back of a motorcycle. And so that was really beneficial when we were thinking about dogs for work in the Annamites. And also their spaniels are typically what we call biddable dogs. So biddable dogs are dogs who are naturally want to engage with people. And that's really important because these dogs aren't just, the handler's not sitting back having a cup of coffee and sending their dog out to go find it. This is very much a team effort where both the dog and their handler are out there searching and they're working as a unit. So we needed dogs who wanted to work with their handler and engage closely with their handler. And spaniels being biddable are also really good for new handlers. So people who aren't necessarily used to working with dogs in this capacity, spaniels are a pretty forgiving breed to do this work. Next slide, please. So how do we do this? We teach the dogs that finding and telling us about a target equals they get to play with their toy. So there's multiple different ways that you can do this. And there's lots of different ideas about the best way to do it. But kind of the 10,000-foot overview is you start off with the handler knowing the answer. And then after time and time of you telling the dog the answer, eventually it will switch where the dog knows the answer and tells you about it. So one way that you can do this is through what we call a lineup. So that photo there on the left, that's Fenton at our headquarters here in Missoula, Montana, doing a lineup. So each one of those white pipes has an odor in it, and one of them is the target odor. And the first time that Fenton goes down there and sniffs all of those, I know which one of those pipes has the target odor in it, and I will mark him when he sniffs it so that's either by a verbal cue or by using what's called a clicker. Um, and as soon as he sniffs it, I mark him and I reward him with a toy. So Fenton starts pairing that odor of the target with getting to play with his toy. And because these dogs are so obsessed with playing with their toy, they naturally want to seek out that target. So over time, we'll start adding in the way that they tell us about this target, which is called a trained final response or an alert. So that's a passive way of the dogs telling us, hey, stop, I found something. It can be a sit, a down, or a stare at the thing. And how we train that is done outside of scent work, and it's a totally different rabbit hole that we won't go down today. Um, but eventually, they'll start telling us about the target. And once they start telling us about the target readily on their own, then we start making the game a little bit harder, placing the scat in novel environments until eventually the dog is ready to go out and find the target on their own in the landscape. And it's really important that it's paired with the toy because to the dog, they're not out there looking for an animal. They're not out there hunting the animal. The dog is out there thinking, I have to find this strange, novel thing in the environment, and that unlocks this toy. My favorite thing in the world is playing with a toy with my handler. And so that's really what they think they're out there doing. They think they're out there going to the ends of the Annamite Mountains to try to find that squeaky toy that they play with. Next slide, please. So there was a lot of really unique challenges to teaching the dogs to search for Saola. The main one being that there was no Saola for us to train on. So if this was, say, a bear project here in Missoula that I was getting a dog ready to train on, I could go down to the area where there are captive bears and I could get training samples of bear dung from there and use that to train my dogs of what they're looking for. We didn't have that option with Saola because there are no Saola in captivity. So we thought, you know what, dogs are really good at being generalists. We're going to take a gamble with this and we're going to say, if we teach you to find all ungulate and bovine species that are both in the Annamite Mountains or closely related to species in the Annamite Mountains, will you tell us about Saola when you find it? And we were actually able to test this from the very beginning. Sarau is one of the ungulate species that is found in the Annamite Mountains, and we knew at some point during their searches the dogs would naturally come across Sarau. So we purposely didn't train the dogs to Sarau prior to them going into the forest. And we thought, we'll just see what happens when they come across it. And because those little spaniels are such little geniuses, the first time they came across Sarau, they told their handlers about it. And so that made us feel really confident that when they do find Saola, they will have the same reaction and tell their handlers about it. And because, as I mentioned, the dogs aren't just set on one target. Sun bears and moon bears are another species of concern in the Annamite Mountains. And because there's a captive population of them at Save the Bears, we were able to get scat samples to train the dogs on for sun bear and moon bear. And as you'll see from Vot and Toe, some of the finds that the dogs have had in the Annamites, it seems like they've taken their generalization further than just ungulates, and they've told us about some pretty unique species that they've come across out there. So when it comes to scat detection, the dogs are really able to give us a broad scope of species that are still thriving in the Annamite Mountains. And this is data that we previously didn't know about. So it's really cool to see all of the different things that the dogs are coming back with. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of the dogs and how conservation detection dogs work. And I'm going to pass it off to Vot and Toe now, who are going to give you some really cool stories and talk about the work that the dogs are doing in the Annamites.
Thank you so much, Renae, for your nice briefing. So this is the picture that can show all of you about how we work in the forest. This is a dog life in the forest. Like a team are based in the forest. These are the bamboo built kennel for the dogs that we work in the forest 90 days as at the base camp, and then we'll come out of the forest for 13 days. Then repeat the cycle, and all needed gear and good food is carried in. Next slide, please. Lulu, next slide, please. Yeah. So before we go back to work in the forest for the first deployment, after our two dogs recover by the health problem, they are strong enough. So beginning of March 2026, Working Dog for Conservation sent Renae Counter, Canine Field Specialist, to support us to refresh the important training and knowledge of first aid kit for 4 weeks, to make sure that our detection dog and handlers are fit and strong enough before we go back to the forest. So this year, we start the first deployment in end of March, and we can did until now 3 dog deployments, and we did the 26 search day, and of course, um, more the dog will do the more search days come in the 2026, and our dog can did a good distance during the first deployment mission. Next slide, please. And in the first and second and third deployment, our dog can did very great job. They are active, and they are still have a good generalization about the main target of ungulated dung, that they can found about 178 points of Monjack dung and 40 points of surround dung and 1 point of white pig dung, and also 30 points of unknown dung that suspected ungulated. And also they can show us a good performance of another target like 9 points of macaque dungs and 3 points of porcupine dungs. Next slide, please. Lulu, next slide, please. Yeah. So in the field missions, in an exciting first couple of days, our dog's Bertie found a dung pellet that was being rolled away by a dung beetle. The test on the species that is formed is forthcoming, and because dog can search for multiple things at once, we also encouraging them to tell us about turtle they encounter. As on turtle in Laos, are animal in concern too. Another dog, Norman, um, did with this adult turtle under a large fallen log. As the project is getting started, there will be more exciting file to report the time. So this is can show us the good performance of our dog, that they can find something very difficult and something special, not just only the dung of the wild animal. Next slide, please. Um, Saola Foundation, we focus on the health safety of our dog is the first priority. As you see in this slide that show you that our dog have always check during and each shirt day, and after shirt we have to check our dog very well. We take off the leash, we take off the tick that cause the disease to our dogs. And each dog also have a heat chip, quickly scan to check the dog temperature for heat safety, because the heat, if very high, can attack or damage our dog health. And also during the daytime, when we have a rest day at the camp, we don't go for a search. Our handler also have a responsibility to do some activity at the camp, like a warm-up routine perform before each survey to prevent the injury and make our dog fit and firm every time. Next slide, please. Yeah, as I mentioned before that we um, keep the dog safety is our priority. This show you that Norman, he is like the drive dog that can work very well and run very fast, and so his temperature is high and up. So when his temperature is very high, sometimes we cool him down with the stream, and while he play in the stream, and his handler also shake the leash and also shake the ticks to take them out of his body to make him healthy. So this is the general life of our team when we work in the forest. So for the next slide, I would like to hand over to To, because he's a technical team. He's gonna tell you what is the challenge of the animal that we work in the forest and out of the forest too.
Thank you, Vatsana. I'm going to talk a little bit about challenging when we work in the field and how to take care the dog after they go out the forest and bed in the office in the town. For challenging, we always find a lot of challenging when we work in the field. The first thing that we always found is terrain, because the conservation area is very far from the town. So sometimes we take 2 or 3 days to get in the field. And some day the terrain is very hard because the rain is fall out, so make the vehicle can get in to pick him up. So we need to bring the dog out with the motorcycle, like you see in the first picture. And the second challenge is the difficult of conservation area, like everyone talked a little bit before. The area somewhere is very hard, very slope and thick by bamboo or tree. And everywhere we go through, we have risk to find the snake, was pig, wild pig, or bear, or tick, or this. Yeah, we have a lot of ranchers for dog. So our handler need to observe clearly when command the dog go through, and they very hard work to take care the dog when they search on the field. Like you see in the picture, sometimes we search along the stream, and the stream there are a lot of waterfall, and the waterfall is very steep, so we need to climb up and carefully, very carefully. And sometimes you're gonna see the trail that we search is very thick by tree or bamboo, so we need to hold the log up to help them to walk over and continue to search. Yeah, it sometimes it's difficult for our search. And the third challenge that we can find every time that we work is the hard weather. In the forest, the weather can change all the time. So some day is very hot and sunny, but some day is rainy all day. So that make a lot of problem for our search as well. Like you see in the last picture, sometimes on the weather is very harsh. We can see clearly, so we need to use the flashlight of the phone to help us to find the scat or the target in the field. Yeah, that is a challenge that we can find all the time that we work in the field. Next slide, please. Okay. When we get back to the town, or when we in the town, when the dog get out the forest, we have a lot of activity for them as well to prepare them to get back again. Like when we the first thing that we do when we arrive at the office, we need to clean the dog, check their health, not to tail, or find the tick, this, or everything that can hurt them. Yeah, and then we wet and dry the hair before we take them in the kennel. Like you see in the picture, we take a shower when we arrive at the office first, and the second, the right picture, you can see the kennel in the office. We also cover by the mosquito nest as well to protect insect get in the kennel, and we also have fan to help flow the air or the time. Yeah, next slide, please. When we wait in the office in Biangthong, we also have log daily routine for them. The first, we have three main things that we did when we wait in the office. The first thing is dog enrichment to provide mental and physical stimulation by engaging dog's natural instinct like chewing, sniffing, and scavenging. And the second thing is maintenance training that we have to do to keep their sense secure and regularly reinforcing the foundational command. And our behavior dog has already done to protect them to forget the command. Yeah, next slide, please. And the last thing that we need to do when we wait in the office is fitness Uh, the fitness focusing on horse conditioning, flexibility, balance, and body awareness to prevent injury or make dog strong. Yeah, that is the activity that we do after we get back from the forest to practice or prepare the dog before we return to work again. Uh-huh. Now, okay. For my portion, I finished now. Thank you.
Thank you, To. Great. Well, that's us on the hour. I'd love to make a couple of moments for questions. So if anybody does have a question that they'd like me to put to one of the speakers, pop it into the chat. I'll just take this chance to say thank you to everybody who's to our presenters today. I mean, thank you for the fascinating talk, but more importantly, thank you for your unbelievably amazing dedication and expertise that you brought to developing these two really exciting and specialized areas of wildlife science and bringing it to Lao and embedding it in our program. So it's just we're so fortunate to have all of you working with us. A special nod of respect to To, who has never presented publicly before in any language and has been teaching himself English over the last couple of years. To, you're absolutely amazing. Thank you very much. You're an absolute star. So thank you very much. Let's see, is there any questions in the chat? I don't see any. You can always get back to us on email, and you'll see some contact details there for us. So I think what we'll do is, if there's no questions coming in, I shall wrap up. Um, just a reminder, if you aren't already a member of our audience, please do sign up to our newsletter and follow our social media channels. We have got a lot of exciting things going on now and then in the years ahead. In the near term, I just want to sort of draw everybody's attention towards the fact that 2026 is our final window of opportunity to find evidence of the rarest of rare Saola in the wild. We're doing everything we can to keep our team in the field searching. We have supporters in the audience today. Thank you. You've helped us achieve so much. If you're interested in becoming a supporter, we'd love to hear from you and explore how we can get you involved. Donations can be made at any time, of course, through our website. Every single contribution counts, and every donation is going to go directly towards our incredible live field team. Finally, next week is World Saola Day. Keep an eye out. We've got a really special short film being released that was being created by our audiovisual lead, Sukhsamlan. If you can like it, share it, comment on it, it helps spread it around the world. So we'd be very grateful if you can help by amplifying our messaging around World Saola Day. So with that, thank you, everybody.
Oh, we do have one question.
Oh, we do. Great. Sorry. Thanks, Lulu. Let's just quickly do that then. Good catch. Let's see. A question for Renae from Kira.
Oh, we got two.
That's great. If you are looking to start training a dog for conservation, are there resources for those beginning stages? Renae?
Yeah. So at Working Dogs for Conservation, we are open source. So we share all of our knowledge of conservation detection dogs. But with that side note, we are also incredibly busy and have a very limited time. But there's a really great group that has come together and formed what is called the Conservation Dog Alliance. So if you just Google Conservation Dog Alliance, you can get in contact with them. It was started by three different folks who individually train conservation dogs, and it's a pool of just all the information and resources you could ever need. I'm on there. A lot of folks from Working Dogs for Conservation are on there, and it's just a way for folks to learn more about conservation dogs.
Great, thank you, Renae. And from Max, a question. Vatsana, I'm going to put this question to you, Vatsana. So Max is asking, how do your conservation dogs navigate snares, and do they encounter many? Vatsana, hopefully you're still there.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So, we also train for working dog for conservation and Karen Shenite to find the snare. But since 2025 until now, we didn't found too much snare in the forest. Yeah.
Yeah, which has been very encouraging that we're not finding many snares. So,
Yep.
uh,
Yep.
uh, Peter, there was a photo of a Noah among the ungulates on one of the slides. Have the dogs been trained to detect a Noah feces because this species might be closely related to Saola, although not occurring in Lao? Renae, do you know if the dogs were trained on a Noah as part of their
Yeah.
training sample?
Yeah, so you're correct, Peter. The dogs were trained to a NOAA. It is genetically one of the most closely related species to Saola. So we train the dogs to species that are endemic to the Annamite Mountains, as well as species that we knew weren't going to be found in the Annamite Mountains, like a NOAA, because we wanted to make sure that the dogs were really, really generalized across ungulate and bovine species.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up, Peter and Renee. So let me just add a point of clarification to what I was saying because we're getting a little bit into the taxonomy and genetic relationships of some of these species. For those of you who are paying attention to this, um, I'm using ungulate as a sort of broad catch-all category when I'm talking about animals that have cloven hooves and leave pelleted scat. But Saola, right, are likely bovines and not ungulates. So if you're paying attention to that, yeah, that's a really good question about a Noah scat maybe being a window into identifying Saola scat.
Great, and I believe it was pretty novel for the dogs to be trained as generalist ungulate dogs. It was this incredible challenge that we had bringing this problem to working dogs for conservation, but without having a Saola training sample. So it's been really incredible to see it work so well. Okay, I think that there are no more questions. I have a little bear cub whispering in my ear that she's very hungry, so I think I have to go as well. And I'm just very grateful for everybody to join us today. And please join us next time and have a wonderful rest of the week. Goodbye, everybody, and thank you again to our speakers.